Welcome to Zoom with KHAZZOOM for Joyful Living. I'm Lulu at KHAZZOOM. I have self-healed from multiple chronic health issues and from trauma through the tools of music, dance, and lifestyle medicine. Along the way, I've had a grand adventure and I've met incredible people. I am excited to share all of this with you now so that no matter what you're facing, you have tools for bringing joy into your life and the lives of people around you. Welcome to Zoom with KHAZZOOM for Joyful Living. I am Lulu at KHAZZOOM. I'm a musician, an author, a personal and professional coach. I am so excited today to welcome Dr. Kenneth Peltier. I have been a fan of his work for many years. We've worked together in different capacities. I've interviewed him for articles as a journalist. I've connected him with my clients as a publicist. I also had the joy of representing his book, Change Your Genes, Change Your Life, which I would like to discuss today, as so many of us are affected by the coronavirus pandemic in one way or another, whether directly or indirectly. And Dr. Peltier has so much to share about the power that we have for self-care. So welcome, Dr. Peltier. Great to see you again.
Thank you. Good to be with you again.
So what I'm wondering is, can you just give a little bit of the backstory? So people have this thought that our genes are our destiny. We have such a feeling of like we don't really have control over what happens to our health. We just kind of do the best we can. Something happens, throw pharmaceuticals at it, maybe we need surgery. And you just blow that thinking out of the water with your book, and it's, you know, backed with all of these really high-end scientific studies. Please just talk about this basic foundational principle about we actually can impact our health and therefore our lives.
Right. Well, the biggest misconception that the general public has, and most physicians, most healthcare providers, is that genes dictate everything about our lives, our height, our weight, the diseases we'll get, how long we will live, etc. So it's a biological determinism. And if we just understood and mapped the code and could read it correctly, we would know everything about our life and our future. That is completely inaccurate because what we know is that less than 5% of what we experience as adults is due to monogenic or fully penetrant genes. In other words, if the gene exists, you will exhibit that trait, 5%. The other 95% is entirely due to what we do in our lives in terms of diet, stress, sleep, exercise, physical activity, environmental exposures, to have our genes express or suppress. So we either can turn a gene on or turn a gene off. So the reality is we have the most potency in terms of influencing our health and even our longevity than we ever believed possible.
And, you know, I find that to be so very true in all of the different health challenges that I've had. So when I was diagnosed with cancer in 2010, I seriously considered surgery. I'm not in any way anti-Western medicine. I am very glad that we have the big guns of pharmaceuticals and surgery. I just feel that we throw those things at our health too quickly, that we don't give our bodies the opportunity to cultivate the right internal environment and also to cultivate the right external environment to support our bodies in healing themselves. And so my choice was to go ahead and just radically alter my diet, my lifestyle, just, you know, always look at what can I heal now? What can I heal now? And in doing that, I was able to cold stop the growth of the nodules. So if you can talk a little bit about why, you know, at this point, there's so many people who've had similar experiences, whether healing from cancer or healing from some other chronic health condition that we are told in conventional medicine cannot be cured, cannot be altered. Why, when so much now science and individual anecdotes fly in the face of that thinking, why do you think that thinking still persists?
Well, again, we have everything in Western medicine is based on a reductionistic biology. and therefore an external causation, external interventions, external causation, be it pharmaceuticals or surgery. Nothing that I've ever written or nothing I've ever said is anti-conventional medicine. It's a perfectly appropriate response if it is in fact needed. If you get hit by a car, you're not going to meditate. You want a good trauma surgeon. That's sort of obvious. And we're misusing and misplacing a perfectly good biomedical system where it's completely inappropriate. Chronic diseases are not amenable to a conventional biological model. We don't have enough people, not enough pharmaceuticals or hospitals, as we're finding out with the COVID pandemic, to possibly treat the number of people that contract illnesses. That's just not a realistic way to achieve health. And so we do have to, as you did, depend on ourselves and to look at how we can influence our outcomes. In reality, most diseases, most conditions, most recoveries are self-generated. Pharmaceuticals, hospitalizations, surgeries, whatever, assist. But in fact, the reality is all recoveries are due to the will and the if you will, courage of the individual patient, all.
Can you talk about, since we are now collectively facing this pandemic and so many people are afraid, and then the fear triggers the fight-flight response, and that just sets off stress mechanism, which actually compromises our immunity and our health. So can you please share with people what are some things that we can do just kind of generally in terms of taking control of our health and our destiny, but also specifically applying to this situation? What is in our hands? Like, other than, okay, we know social distancing, wear a mask, wash your hands frequently. Okay, fine. But what else can we do other than just, cross our fingers, pray to God that nothing happens?
Well, that works too. But there is a great deal that we can do. The reality is that there is so much we simply do not understand about COVID. There is much more we don't understand than the limited amount of information we have to understand it. There are people who are young, they're athletic, they're very healthy, they contract the disease, within 48 hours, they're dead. Other people who are in their 70s and 80s are on a ventilator for 2 or 3 weeks and they recover. So we really don't have any understanding of what the basic mechanism is of how the body recovers, fights off the COVID virus, because we don't have any effective pharmacology for treating COVID. There are a number of studies going on, but right now, in fact, remdesivir, the Gilead pharmaceutical, was just disproven today. The chloroquine hoax or rumor was disproven a couple of days ago in a study from the Veterans Administration. So we don't have any good treatments, and we have, again, the social distancing is probably the most effective. But if you look at generally the people who succumb to COVID, they don't succumb to pneumonias. The people that have pre-existing conditions, predominantly hypertension, heart disease, obesity, and diabetes, they are disproportionately represented in COVID patients who are admitted to hospitals. So the pre-existing conditions are in fact what ultimately leads to the person's death. The COVID causes a decompensation in their body, predominantly in the lungs and predominantly in inflammation around the myocardium or the sheath of the heart. Those are actually the cause of death, are mostly cardiovascular. So the bottom line is that we have so much that we can do to prevent, to stabilize our health, so we're not more susceptible to getting an infection. We also can, in fact, remain healthy when we do contract the virus. So good sleep is essential, is really critical to stabilizing our immunity. Having a form of stress management is again critical. You rightfully point out that stress and fear suppresses immunity. Suppressed immunity makes us more susceptible. Diet is an incredibly effective, powerful influence on genetic expression. So if you have an extremely reactive, extremely inflammatory diet, largely from red meats and white sugar, white flours, you're going to be more susceptible to any and all infections, including the COVID virus. So physical activity, we know that physical activity is an immune stabilizer. And my concern is that when we see a lot of the hype on the internet about enhancing immunity, we don't need enhanced immunity. In fact, COVID, the cytokine storm, which is in a hyperimmunity, is actually the most immediate cause of death for COVID patients. So it's not enhancing our immunity. We need immunostabilization. We need to take all of these steps, vitamins, nutraceuticals, exercise, sleep, stress management, environmental awareness. All of those things will stabilize our immunity, allow us to remain healthy. And if in fact we contract a virus, we have a much higher likelihood of surviving.
So what you're really talking about is a state of balance. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, actually it is. And the human body, as I mentioned earlier, most people recover from what afflicts them, generally. The vast majority of disease is self-limiting, i.e. it self-corrects. And therefore, in Louis Pasteur, had the terrain intérieur, or the interior terrain. So you have the individual body, the mind-body system, all the receptor sites in the body, and then you have the external viruses, insults, injuries, bacteria. But if there's no hospitable interior terrain for those to take root, for those to bond, if you will, then we have a very healthy state of immunity. And it is one of balance. It's not one of excess, and it's one of true balance. I mean, many of the claims, if you will, are really taken to extremes, and those are dangerous. Even the natural, quote, natural remedies have, when they're used in a clinical dosage, are harmful, potentially harmful.
Right. You know, it's interesting because when this all hit, I had gratitude that I had been on this path of healing from cancer because I already had things in place. And what I'm saying, and I'll just elaborate on that to make sure it's clear. So I'm already eating an all organic, nutrient dense diet. I already have supplements that, you know, we're being encouraged to have: elderberry, vitamin D, vitamin C. I already have that in my supplements. You know, I already had very wise integrative medicine practitioners in my network that I could immediately reach out to and say, hey, what should I be doing right now to take care of myself? So it seems to me that one aspect coming out of this whole crisis is perhaps it will be a wake-up call. You know, the kind of positive spin on it is it can be a wake-up call of, why has this hit so hard? What do we need to be putting in place? How do we need to be rethinking our ideas about medicine and about wellness and about our role in it? You know, two things that came up for me was when my boyfriend and I went hiking a few weeks ago, I was really thrown off by the parks being closed. And I thought, well, I need to be in nature because it's a counterbalance for all of the hysteria that's going on. And I feel so deeply peaceful when I'm in nature, and it calms down my whole system. It brings me into balance. And I was thinking about that. I was like, if we had a society where nature was recognized as being as valid a form of medicine as pharmaceuticals and surgery, I don't think it would have been closed so quickly, right? It was the go-to was like, well, there's problems with social distancing, so just get rid of it. And I was thinking about how when I was a child, we had the OPEC crisis and the shortage in gas. Well, they didn't just say, okay, nobody's allowed to drive their cars. Why? Because gas was valued. Driving your car was valued. So they got smart about it. And they're like, okay, even license plates come on this day to the gas station, odd license plate come on that day. They did a major campaign. I still remember it to this day. You know, a major campaign on, if you don't need to drive, walk, take a bike, take public transportation. And it worked. People changed their behavior. So I was thinking, you know, if we valued the importance of nature as bringing people into balance, as being a form of medicine, maybe they would have had a think tank to figure out, how do we get social distancing enforced? How do we get people on board, but not get rid of nature? And the other thing that came up for me was, you know, I would love it that if instead of having this reactive approach, that the government would be subsidizing all of the kinds of supplements or, you know, whatever it is that we can do proactively to bring our bodies into a state of balance, to have an educational campaign to help people to in that regard. And I've been seeing instead there's just this mass hysteria and, you know, causing this fear and this panic, which I feel is just doing the opposite. It's just, you know, like I said before, it's putting people into a state of stress. So if you could please share your thoughts about, you know, again, with the understanding we have limited knowledge about the exact mechanisms, but with what we do know so far, what maybe could the government be doing differently, or the medical system be doing differently, or how can we turn this crisis into an opportunity for rethinking how we individually are approaching our health and how we collectively are thinking about medicine and what we make available to people?
Well, there's a great deal. I mean, you're very articulate, and what you've described, I think, are all necessary steps. There is a silver lining to a great deal of what's taking place. I mean, one, we've learned to really respect and honor the first responders. I mean, the heroics of the medical staff, the nursing staff, firemen and police is astounding. And I think that's going to persist. That's been growing for a long time, ever since 9/11 and continuing. So I think that's, you know, a positive change. Certainly the kind of environmental quality that we're now experiencing in terms of it's being quieter.
Right.
Not as many jets flying overhead. Water is actually becoming more pure in the canals in Venice. The pollution is visibly decreased over China, over Los Angeles. And one woman in Wuhan was quoted as saying, for the first time in decades, she can hear birds sing in the city. So there's been we can see how rapidly the environment can change, and many of the things that we're doing. So we could ride bicycles more. And I think clearly what's going to happen is people will be commuting to work less. Certainly the internet use now is really embedded in how we do business. I hear a lot of companies talking about the fact that they're suspending leases, they're not going to reopen office space, they're going to continue to work at a distance. So perhaps there'll be less cars on the road and less pollution. Certainly there's a greater appreciation of the fact that we do in fact govern our own health. I mean, that's very, very clear. At this point, and that we can't rely on a medical care system that does not have solutions. We're faced now with the absolute dead end of a medical care approach. There's no effective surgery. There's no effective pharmaceutical. Most people who in fact go on ventilators, 80 or 90% end up terminal. So that's not a solution either. So we realize that we've hit a dead end here. And the coronavirus, this particular one, it's not going to be over. And National Geographic published a study about a month ago that looked at the Spanish flu epidemic in 1918, pandemic. And they looked at cities all over the world where the mortality rate was the highest. And they found a peak and a trough, and largely due to social distancing. However, they also found within a few months after the reinstatement of normal social behavior, there was another peak. It was not as large and it was not as protracted, but there was a definite increase in hospitalizations and subsequent deaths from the same virus that created the flu. So predictably, in the fall, at minimum, we're going to have another spike, and it's going to tax our medical care system. So between now and then, we all have an opportunity to do many of the things that you've been talking about with our diet, our stress, our sleep, our physical activity, having social engagement, even if it's by Zoom, there is a social contact, to basically ensure that we have a healthier society. I mean, what you are describing, what I've been advocating for a long, long time, is that what we need is a true healthcare system. Because right now, overall, in the United States and the post-industrial nations, we do not have a healthcare system. We call it that, and it's a misnomer. What we have is a disease management industry. And that's not pejorative. Disease is the province of medicine. Its management is, in fact, what physicians and other healthcare providers are trained to do. And at 30% of the GDP in the United States, it's certainly an industry. So we have a major shift that needs to take place away from disease management to health enhancement, health stabilization. I think that is in fact occurring.
I love that. I love that. You know, on topic, I have been wanting to garden for a long time, and I have a history of killing plants, but I really want to learn how to do it. And this has given me a kick in the pants. My boyfriend just started working on clearing out. I have a hot house, you know, that I've never used. So he's clearing it out. We're going to start small, tomatoes, basil, something, because I was like, man, I need to remove myself from this whole, you know, supply chain, and just start becoming self-sufficient. I'm thinking goats now, chickens, you know. So I love what you're saying about how, okay, guys, we have a warning. You got your wake-up call. It's going to happen again. You now have X number of months to get it together and start rethinking how you are living your life. So I want to highly recommend your book, Change Your Genes, Change Your Life. I loved it. It's also very accessible. You happen to hit this balance of being able to talk about all the science in a way that's really accessible to the layperson. And I really appreciated that about the way you wrote the book. So I'd like to highly recommend it for people. Any last words on what can people do in their individual lives between now and the fall? Like some maybe baby steps, specific baby steps. You know, keeping in mind we all have different resources, we all have different circumstances. What are just maybe 2 or 3 things that people should really start paying a little bit more attention to get their bodies strong?
Well, it's a good question. I think for anyone at any time to begin to develop a stress management technique, practice. And it doesn't matter what it is, quite honestly. It can be listening to music, seeing a visualization, hearing a sound in your mind, a mantra, a prayer, whatever. But just create a way to manage the stress that we're all subjected to, one. Secondly, to improve your diet, move away from processed foods and heavy meat consumption and white rice and white sugars. Those are toxic, they're poison. Just eliminate those from your diet. Becoming physically active. I think all of us are going to be happy to be able to go outside and walk around again. You know, so make that a celebration that now we're able to, in fact, walk around. And now that we've created a more quiet environment, walk more, take bikes, take public transportation, right. Be more conscious of the impact we have on our environment. And I think you had a great idea, which is create a small garden. It could be a window garden of herbs and spices, but something that connects you to the earth and the sources of our own food. I think all of those would be very minor steps. And the other is laughter. I mean, we really, you know, some of the jokes, humor going around on the internet now is wonderful, right. Because we need that. Right. One of my professors in medical school had a sign on his desk that said, "Angels can fly because they take themselves lightly."
Right. And
he advocated humor as a great therapeutic, and I would totally agree with that.
Right. Right. I love it. Ken, it is always a pleasure to talk with you, and I love your heart-centered and very intelligent approach to medicine. Thank you for the sacred work that you do in changing the way that we think about our health and our world. Please tell people anything they need to know about your website, any programs coming up. You know, I would love for them to know how to access you above and beyond your book.
Oh, well, that's easy. My website is just drpelletier.com. And there are any number of webinars and lectures that are on there. Who knows if the lectures will take place, but the webinars will. But it's a good place. I post articles on a weekly basis for all the things that we're talking about. And there are videos and articles, all that are available free. So that's probably the best place.
Terrific. Thank you, Dr. Kenneth Pelletier, author of Change Your Genes, Change Your Life.
Thank you again.
All right. Thank you, Ken.
Great job. Good. This was fun.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lulua KHAZZOOM, the host of Zoom with KHAZZOOM for Joyful Living. I'd like to give a shout out to my mom in the afterlife, EJ KHAZZOOM. I wear her art, her rings, her bracelets, her necklaces, her barrettes while I am having conversations with people on my show. And she was a self-taught artist. She did ceramics, metal, crochet, very brilliant woman. So love you, mommy.